The cold booth by the window. The bell above the cafe door jingled softly as Lena Brooks wiped the counter for the third time, even though it was already clean. Her feet ached the way they always did at the end of a long shift, and the smell of coffee clung to her clothes like a second skin. Outside, winter pressed its cold face against the windows, turning the street into a blur of frost and yellow streetlights. It had been a slow evening. Too slow. Slow nights meant small tips, and small tips meant another anxious calculation of how far her paycheck could stretch. Rent was due in 3 days. The refrigerator at home was almost empty. Still, Lena forced herself to smile. Smiling cost nothing, and sometimes it was the only thing she had left to give. Behind the counter, Mark Reynolds leaned against the register, scrolling on his phone. "Hope no more strays wander in," he muttered. "We're not running a shelter." Lena didn't respond. She had learned that silence was safer. Just then, the bell rang again. Lena looked up and saw a man step inside, holding the hand of a small girl. The man looked tired in a way that went deeper than lack of sleep. His coat was thin, his shoulders slightly hunched, as if the cold had found its way into his bones. The girl beside him couldn't have been more than 6. She wore a pink jacket that was clearly too small and hugged a worn stuffed rabbit to her chest. They hesitated near the door, letting the warmth wash over them. "Go ahead," the man whispered to the girl. "Pick a seat." The girl's eyes wandered across the cafe, lingering on plates of half-eaten meals and cups still steaming. Her stomach growled, loud enough that Lena heard it from across the room. The girl's cheeks flushed, and she looked down. They chose the smallest booth, the one by the window where the cold always seemed to sneak in. The man helped the girl sit, then slid in across from her. He took off his coat and folded it carefully, as if trying to look like someone who belonged there. Lena approached with menus in hand. "Good evening," she said gently. "What can I get you?" The man glanced at the prices, his eyes flicking quickly from line to line. He swallowed. "Could we just have hot water?" Mark let out a short laugh from behind the counter. Lena shot him a warning look. "Of course," she said softly. "Anything else?" The girl tugged on her father's sleeve. "Daddy," she whispered. "Maybe we can share a cookie?" The man smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Not today, sweetheart. Maybe next time." Lena walked away, her chest tightening. She poured the hot water, but her hands slowed as she watched the girl cradle the cup as if it were treasure. Memories rose uninvited. Being a child. Being hungry. Being told maybe next time. She reached into her apron and pulled out her tip money. It wasn't much. Barely enough for bus fare and bread. She hesitated only a second. Then she made a choice. Lena returned to the booth carrying a tray. On it sat a cup of hot chocolate, steam curling upward, and a grilled sandwich cut neatly in half. The man looked up sharply. "I didn't order this." Lena set the tray down gently. "I know," she said. "It's on me." "I can't accept this," he said quickly, shaking his head. "We're fine." The girl's eyes were wide now, reflecting the dark chocolate like stars. She looked from Lena to her father, unsure. Lena leaned in just enough to lower her voice. "Please," she said. "I had a good day. Let me share it." The man searched her face, something flickering behind his eyes. Pride. Gratitude. Maybe both. Finally, he nodded once. "Thank you," he said quietly. "You have no idea what this means." The girl didn't wait. She wrapped her hands around the mug and took a careful sip. Her face broke into a smile so bright it seemed to warm the entire booth. "This is the best hot chocolate ever," she declared. Lena laughed softly. "I'm glad you like it." While they ate, Lena noticed the girl drawing on a napkin with a crayon from her pocket. When they were finished, the girl slid the napkin toward Lena. On it was a simple picture. 3 stick figures holding hands beneath a crooked heart. "For you," the girl said shyly. Lena knelt beside the booth, her throat tight. "It's beautiful. Thank you." The man stood and placed a few coins on the table. "I'm sorry it's not more," he said. "It's enough," Lena replied, and she meant it. As they walked toward the door, the man paused. He turned back once more. "Kindness like yours," he said. "It changes things." Lena smiled, unaware that the life she knew was already beginning to change. The bell jingled softly as they stepped back into the cold, leaving behind a warm booth, an empty cup, and a moment that would echo far beyond this quiet cafe. The man with nothing and everything. The cold followed Daniel Carter and his daughter down the sidewalk, but it felt lighter somehow. Mia skipped beside him, her small hand wrapped tightly around his. The pink jacket still didn't fit, and the night was still bitter, yet her steps were quicker than before. "That lady was really nice," Mia said, looking back at the cafe windows glowing behind them. "She didn't look mad at all." Daniel smiled faintly. "No, she didn't." They reached the old sedan parked beneath a flickering streetlight. Daniel opened the door for Mia, tucking the blanket around her legs before walking around to the driver's side. He sat for a moment without starting the engine, staring at the cafe door as if expecting it to open again. Inside, Lena was clearing tables, unaware she was being watched. "You did good tonight," Daniel said softly, though Mia had already leaned her head against the window, drifting toward sleep. He started the car and drove 2 streets over, stopping beside a dark SUV that looked wildly out of place in the quiet neighborhood. A man stepped out the moment Daniel parked. "Sir," the man said, lowering his voice, "you didn't have to stay that long." Daniel sighed as he stepped out. "I wanted to." Thomas Hale had known Daniel for nearly 15 years. He had seen him sign billion-dollar contracts without blinking. He had seen him on magazine covers, in boardrooms, in private jets. And yet every time Daniel did this, Thomas felt the same confusion. "You let that manager talk to you like that," Thomas said. "In front of your daughter." Daniel didn't look offended. He looked thoughtful. "She needs to see the world as it is, not as money makes it." Thomas glanced at the cafe again. "And the waitress." Daniel nodded. "Especially her." Inside the cafe, Lena was being scolded. "You paid for that food yourself?" Mark snapped, arms crossed. "You think that's smart? You're not here to rescue every sad story that walks in." Lena kept her eyes on the counter. "I didn't break any rules." "You broke common sense," Mark replied. "People like that always expect more." Mrs. Finch stood near the kitchen doorway, listening without interrupting. Her sharp eyes moved from Mark to Lena and back again. "Enough," she said finally. "The shift's over. Go home." Lena grabbed her coat, her heart heavy but her conscience strangely light. Outside, Daniel watched Lena step into the cold, pulling her scarf tight around her neck. She didn't notice him standing across the street. She didn't see the black SUV. She didn't know that the man she had helped could buy the cafe 3 times over without checking his account. "She didn't hesitate," Daniel said quietly. "Did you see her face when Mia smiled?" Thomas nodded. "I did." "Run a background check," Daniel continued. "Nothing invasive. Just enough to know her story." Thomas hesitated. "And then what?" Daniel looked down at his sleeping daughter through the car window. "Then we see what kindness looks like when it's returned." The next morning, Lena woke to her phone buzzing. Another message from her landlord. Another reminder of bills she couldn't ignore. She dressed quickly, skipped breakfast, and headed back to the cafe. The bell rang again. Daniel walked in alone this time. He looked different, cleaner. His coat was newer, his posture straighter. Still simple. Still quiet. Lena almost didn't recognize him. She approached cautiously. "Good morning." "Good morning," Daniel said, offering a polite smile. "I'd like to order breakfast." Lena took the order, surprised. When she returned with the plate, Daniel was already standing. "I'm sorry," he said. "I need to leave." He placed a folded bill on the table and walked out. Lena unfolded it. It was more money than she usually made in a day. Mark noticed immediately. "Guess they found cash after all," he muttered. Lena didn't respond. Something about the encounter felt unfinished. By afternoon, the cafe buzzed with nervous energy. 2 men in suits entered, flashing badges. Mark's confidence vanished. Health inspection, one said. And financial review. Mrs. Finch's face paled. Across the street, Daniel stood beside Thomas, watching quietly. This place mattered to her, Daniel said. But it forgot what it stood for. Thomas nodded. Everything's ready. Inside, Lena stood frozen as Mark argued with the inspectors. Papers were spread across tables. Voices rose. Customers whispered. Then the door opened again. Daniel entered calmly. Every eye turned toward him. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't smile. He simply walked to the center of the room and spoke. "My name is Daniel Carter," he said. "As of this morning, I am the new owner of this building." Silence crashed over the cafe like a wave. Lena's breath caught. Daniel's eyes met hers across the room, steady and kind. "And I believe," he added, "it's time this place remembered why it exists." Lena felt her knees weaken. The man she had helped with a cup of hot chocolate was not who she thought he was at all. And yet, somehow, he was exactly who she thought he was. When kindness comes back around. The cafe felt smaller after Daniel spoke his name. No one moved. Even the hum of the refrigerator seemed to fade into the background. Lena stood behind the counter, her fingers gripping the edge so tightly her knuckles turned pale. She searched Daniel's face for some sign that this was a misunderstanding. It wasn't. Mrs. Finch slowly stepped forward, her voice unsteady. "You're the new owner." Daniel nodded once. "Yes, ma'am." Mark let out a nervous laugh. "This has to be a joke," he said. "You can't just walk in and—" "I can," Daniel replied calmly. "And I have." The inspectors exchanged looks, then returned to their papers. Mark's confidence drained from his face as reality settled in. Daniel turned toward Mrs. Finch. "I know this cafe has been struggling. Rising costs. Fewer customers. Pressure makes people forget who they are." Mrs. Finch swallowed hard. "We've done our best." "I believe that," Daniel said. "But I also believe people deserve to be treated with dignity, especially when they have little." Lena felt her chest tighten. She knew he was talking about her. About that night. Mark crossed his arms. "Are we done here?" Daniel's gaze shifted to him, steady and unyielding. "No. We're just beginning." He gestured to a chair and sat down, as if he had all the time in the world. "Mr. Reynolds, I've reviewed the reports. Customer complaints, staff turnover, and behavior toward guests." Mark scoffed. "People exaggerate." Daniel leaned forward. "Children don't." The room went still. "You humiliated a father in front of his daughter," Daniel continued. "You mocked people for what they could afford. That ends today." Mark's face flushed. "You can't fire me for one bad night." "I'm not," Daniel said. "I'm letting you go for many." Mrs. Finch closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, she nodded. "I agree." Mark opened his mouth to argue, then thought better of it. He grabbed his coat and stormed out, the bell clanging sharply behind him. No one spoke for several seconds. Daniel stood and turned to the staff. "This cafe stays open. Jobs stay secure. Wages increase. But respect is non-negotiable." A murmur of relief swept the room. He then looked directly at Lena. She felt her heart pound in her ears. "Lena Brooks," he said, "you paid for food when you could barely afford it. You defended strangers without expecting anything in return." Lena shook her head, embarrassed. "I just did what felt right." Daniel smiled slightly. "That's exactly why it matters." Mrs. Finch stepped beside her. "Lena has always cared," she said quietly. "I was blind to it." Daniel nodded. "I'd like Lena to be promoted to floor supervisor, effective immediately." Lena gasped. "Me?" "You," Daniel said. "If you're willing." Tears blurred her vision. She nodded, unable to speak. Later that afternoon, the cafe reopened under a strange new energy. Customers returned, curious. Staff smiled more freely. The space felt warmer, brighter. Daniel returned in the evening, this time with Mia. Mia ran straight to Lena and hugged her without warning. "Hot chocolate lady." Lena laughed through tears and hugged her back. "I think that name is sticking." Daniel watched them, his chest aching in a way that felt almost good. After closing, Daniel sat across from Lena at the same booth by the window. The one that had started everything. "I didn't plan this," Lena admitted. "I never thought." "I know," Daniel said. "That's why I trusted it." He told her about his wife, about the loss that hollowed him out, about stepping away from wealth to find meaning again. "I want Mia to grow up knowing that kindness matters more than money," he said. "You taught her that in one night." Lena looked at Mia, who was coloring quietly beside them. "She's a wonderful child." Daniel smiled. "She makes me better." He stood and extended his hand. "I hope you'll stay. Not just as an employee, but as someone we trust." Lena shook his hand, her grip trembling. "I'd like that." Outside, snow began to fall softly, settling on the windows like a promise. For the first time in a long while, Lena felt something unfamiliar. Security. And for Daniel, watching his daughter laugh in the cafe that had nearly turned them away, it felt like something he thought he'd lost forever. Hope. A table for 3. The cafe was quiet after closing, the kind of quiet that felt peaceful instead of lonely. Chairs were stacked, lights dimmed, and outside the snow continued to fall in soft, steady flakes. Lena wiped the last table slowly, as if she didn't want the moment to end. At the booth by the window, Daniel sat with Mia, helping her finish a drawing. She hummed happily, her feet swinging beneath the table. "Lena," Mia called. "Come see." Lena walked over and leaned down. The picture showed 3 people sitting at a table, smiling. Above them, in uneven letters, were the words "Our Cafe Family." Lena felt her chest tighten. "That's beautiful," she said honestly. Mia beamed. "Daddy says families don't always start the same way." Daniel looked up surprised. "Did I say that?" Mia nodded seriously. "You did." Lena smiled, then pulled out the chair across from them. "May I sit?" "Please," Daniel said. For a moment none of them spoke. The hum of the heater and the soft ticking of the clock filled the space. It felt like a pause the world had granted them. "I want to thank you," Daniel said finally, his voice calm but heavy with meaning. "Not for the food. For the way you treated us. You didn't see a poor man and his daughter. You saw people." Lena looked down at her hands. "I know what it feels like," she said quietly. "To be invisible." Daniel nodded. "After my wife died, everything I built felt empty. I wanted Mia to grow up grounded, to understand life beyond comfort." He looked at his daughter, who was now leaning against Lena's arm without even realizing it. "That night," he continued, "you gave her more than hot chocolate. You gave her a memory." Mia yawned and rested her head fully against Lena. "I like it here," she murmured. Lena swallowed hard. Over the next few weeks, the cafe changed. Not in flashy ways but in quiet ones that mattered. Customers returned. Staff laughed more. The menu stayed simple, but the atmosphere warmed. Lena stepped into her new role naturally. She learned names, remembered orders, made sure no one ever felt unwelcome again. Daniel stopped by often, sometimes with Mia, sometimes alone. He never acted like an owner. He washed cups, wiped counters, listened. One afternoon, Mrs. Finch pulled Lena aside. "I was wrong," she said. "I forgot why I opened this place. You reminded me. Life didn't become perfect overnight. Lena still worked hard. Daniel still carried grief. But something had shifted. One evening, after a long day, Daniel stayed behind as Lena locked the door. "I've been thinking," he said. "Mia's school is nearby. She loves coming here. And she's grown attached to you." Lena felt her heart race, unsure where this was going. "I'm not offering charity," Daniel said gently. "I'm offering connection. Dinners together. Holidays. A place at the table." Lena's eyes filled with tears. I've never really had that. Daniel smiled softly. Neither have we. Not like this. That night, the three of them sat at the same booth where it all began. They shared soup, laughed over spilled drinks, and talked about small things that somehow felt big. Outside, the snow melted quietly. Weeks later, a small sign appeared near the register. It read, "Everyone is welcome here." Customers noticed. They smiled. On a sunny afternoon, Lena watched Mia run across the cafe, her laughter echoing between tables. Daniel caught Lena's eye and nodded, grateful beyond words. Sometimes, kindness doesn't come back as money or praise. Sometimes it comes back as belonging. At a small booth by the window, a family had found each other. Not because of wealth, but because one waitress chose to care. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness carries the greatest power. A cup of hot chocolate, a gentle smile, a moment of care given without expecting anything in return. That night, Lena didn't know who she was helping, and it didn't matter. Because true kindness is never about who someone is or what they have. It's about seeing a person when the world has turned away. And sometimes, when kindness is given freely, it comes back not as wealth or reward, but as something far more valuable. A family, a place to belong, and a reminder that even on the coldest nights, warm hearts can change everything.